The question that has been in my mind for 50 years is, why is the United States government suppressing research into certain medicines while at the same time allowing research into other medicines?
Following the ban on psychedelics in 1967, experimentation began to shift outside the laboratory.
About 45 years ago or so, maybe longer, I have to count the number of years, I was a graduate student working on my doctorate in clinical psychology, and myself and another graduate student read about Leary and Alpert's work at Harvard, and we went out and purchased hundreds of Heavenly Blue and Pearly Gates morning glory seeds, which we proceeded with a couple of people that we selected as our guides to ingest. I don't know how many hundreds we ate, but we did eat hundreds of morning glory seeds. And we proceeded to have quite a profound psychedelic experience.
The man chuckling in the background is Dr. Dennis McKenna, one of the dozen or so experts on psychedelics who Richard has interviewed on his show. Doctors Timothy Leary and Richard Alpert had been fired for research into psilocybin.
And I thought, my gosh, that could happen to me. Maybe I'm going to want to do research into hypnosis someday, or maybe religion, or maybe politics, or where might I step my foot with this, my curious attitude that I had, and get myself fired. And virtually that was the end of my academic career.
Freed from the constraints of academic research, Leary and many others turned to less strictly scientific advocacy.
I'll beat the drum as well as I can, but I don't want to be seen as just a sort of mindless advocate of psychedelics, and I think that's one of the things that got Timothy Leary and Richard Alpert and his colleagues into trouble, and I don't really blame them. I think that at the time, these substances were new. They sort of erupted into our society without any tradition, without any context.
Harvard dismissed him in 1963. He is now out on a $30,000 bond for possession of marijuana.
It crossed over from science and medical research into politics, and certainly LSD. I think LSD, more than any of these other substances, just came at a certain time when society was undergoing change. And if it hadn't been Timothy Leary, it would have been someone else.
I think it's time to stop. Drop out. Thank you.
This seems to be a good place to revisit the disclaimer. Richard is a psychologist, but he is not prescribing medicines or endorsing any substances.
We might at times give you warnings about what you shouldn't take, but that's not promoting. That's warning, and it's a whole different story.
These powerful experiences, combined with the cautionary tale of Leary and Alpert, led Richard to drop out of academia and join an emerging movement of free-thinking psychologists in California.
In 1966, I went to a meeting of the national meeting of the American Psychological Association in Washington, D.C., and I met a psychiatrist named Fritz Perls. And I was so taken with his presentation at the conference that I actually, at a break of his presentation, I followed him into the men's room, and I said to him, who are you, and where do you teach? And with a heavy Viennese accent, he said that he lived in California at the Esalen Institute.
Richard was curious, so he drove across the country in his little Volkswagen during the next break in academic teaching.
While I was at Esalen, I got very interested in the use of the hot mineral water that they had available. And I started to study it, it being what the Greeks called balneology. Balneology is the use of hot mineral water coming out of the ground for healing purposes. Well, that led to my search for the world's best hot mineral springs, because I thought if there really was healing to take place with water coming out of the ground, I wanted to really study it and find out, is there good, better, and best? And that set me off in a different direction in my career as a healer. in that I started to incorporate such things as natural hot water coming out of the ground in the detoxification process for people who suffered from chemical dependence. Prior to my using the hot mineral springs, and even today as well, very often people go to the hospital for detoxification. I proved to the world that you didn't need to go to a hospital, that you could actually go to a remote hot springs and be detoxified from heroin, cocaine, alcohol, and methamphetamine.
While Richard was busy pioneering the treatment of chemical dependence, other researchers were slowly accumulating new evidence confirming the early science which had suggested possible medical uses for psychedelics. You can visit the Psychepedia Index for more information about specific topics and substances, and be sure to subscribe in iTunes or to our email list for new episodes.
My purpose in bringing you this series on psychedelic medicine is to give you the most up-to-date information we have available on the little research that's going on in this country and around the world.